The rain against the plate glass of the Sterling did not sound like weather. It sounded like static, a dulled, rhythmic interference trying to scratch its way into a hermetically sealed world. Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil, aged leather, and the specific, metallic scent of money old enough to have lost its novelty. Julian stood at the host podium, his posture rigid, his spine aligned with the architectural precision of the room behind him. He was not merely a manager, he was the filter. He was the membrane through which the chaotic, untidy world outside had to pass to become the curated, golden silence of the dining room. Every table was full. Every guest was verified. The ambient noise was a low, pleasant hum calibrated to exactly 60 decibels. Julian checked the tablet in front of him. The glowing screen was his scripture. It told him who belonged and who did not. It flagged dietary restrictions, anniversaries, and net worth tiers in color-coded simplicity. Blue for VIP, gold for investor. Red for do not seat. The heavy oak door at the entrance opened. The draft that entered was cold, carrying the smell of wet asphalt. It cut through the warmth of the lobby like a knife. Julian looked up, a practiced smile already forming on his lips. The kind that reached the eyes but never touched the soul. The smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. The man standing in the vestibule was dripping wet. He wore a dark overcoat, soaked through at the shoulders, and he held a collapsed umbrella that dripped a dark puddle onto the pristine marble floor. He was black, in his early 60s, with graying hair close cropped to his scalp. He was not shouting. He was not aggressive. He simply stood there, wiping his feet on the mat with a slow, deliberate friction. Julian stepped out from behind the podium. His movements were fluid, designed to intercept. In the hospitality industry, this was known as controlling the space. You did not wait for the anomaly to reach the dining room. You stopped it at the threshold. "Good evening, sir," Julian said. His voice was soft, pitched to carry no further than the vestibule. "May I help you?" The man looked up. His eyes were tired, framed by deep lines that suggested a lifetime of patience wearing thin. He reached into his coat pocket. Julian's muscles tensed instinctively, a reaction trained into him not by violence, but by the fear of disruption. But the man only produced a pair of reading glasses and a smartphone. "I have a reservation," the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and quiet. "Under Vance for 7:30. Julian glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner. It was 7:35. "I apologize, Mr. Vance. If you'll give me a moment." Julian returned to the podium. He didn't need to look. He knew the list. He had memorized the rhythm of the night before the doors even opened. There was a Vance on the list. A reservation made 3 weeks ago through the corporate portal. A table for one. An anomaly in itself. People rarely ate alone at the Sterling unless they were critics or tragedies. Julian tapped the screen. The name was there. David Vance. But next to the name, the system had flagged a notification, payment authorization pending. It was a small glitch, a technicality. In a normal restaurant, on a normal night, a manager would override it, seat the guest, and sort out the credit card later. But the Sterling was not a normal restaurant, and tonight was not a normal night. The investors were in the private dining room. The regional director was eating at table 4. The atmosphere had to be flawless. Julian looked back at the man. He saw the water dripping from the coat. He saw the shoes, sensible, comfortable, but scuffed by the weather. They were not the shoes of the clientele Julian was paid to protect. He looked at the dining room. He saw the candlelight reflecting off wine glasses. He saw a couple at table 9 holding hands. He imagined this man wet and weary, trudging past them, dragging the smell of the storm into their sanctuary. He imagined the regional director raising an eyebrow. Julian made a choice. It wasn't a choice born of hatred, he told himself. It was a choice born of standards. It was a choice for the greater good of the room. He walked back to the man. He clasped his hands in front of him. "I'm afraid I can't find a reservation under that name, sir," Julian lied. The lie came easily. It was smoothed, polished by years of managing capacity. The man, Mr. Vance, paused. He put his glasses on and tapped his phone screen. "I have the confirmation right here. Confirmation code 8084, Bravo." He held the phone out. Julian didn't look at it. To look at the proof would be to acknowledge the error, and the Sterling did not make errors. "I understand that, sir," Julian said, his tone dropping an octave, becoming more sympathetic, more final. "But our system does not show an active booking. It's possible the reservation was canceled due to the arrival time. We have a strict 15-minute grace period. And with the weather, it's 7:37, Vance said. He looked at the clock. "I am 7 minutes late. Our clock is synchronized with the kitchen, sir. It runs differently. It was nonsense, complete nonsense." But it was spoken with authority. Vance lowered the phone. He looked at Julian. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. It was a look that pricked at Julian's conscience, a tiny needle of guilt that he immediately suppressed with professional indignation. Why is he making this difficult? Julian thought. Can't he see he doesn't fit? "I traveled 2 hours to eat here," Vance said softly. "I just want a meal. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking for the table I booked." "I cannot see to walk in tonight," Julian said, shifting his terminology. Vance was no longer a guest with a lost reservation. He was now a walk-in, a random element. "Why are fully committed? I'm sure you understand." Vance looked past Julian into the warm glow of the dining room. There were 2 empty tops near the window. "You have tables," Vance noted. "Those are reserved for members," Julian said. Another lie. They were open. They were held for visual balance. Vance took a breath. He seemed to grow taller, straightening his spine against the weight of the wet coat. "Young man," he said, and the use of the term made Julian bristle. "I am hungry. I have money. I have a confirmation, please. Don't do this." This was the moment, the pivot point. Julian could have stopped. He could have said, "Let me check again." He could have taken the coat, apologized for the confusion, and led the man to the warm table by the window. He could have been human. But Julian was tired. The stress of the regional director's presence was a vice around his temples. He wanted the lobby clear. He wanted the puddle on the floor mopped up. He wanted the aesthetic purity of the evening restored. He saw this man not as a person, but as a smudge on a perfectly polished lens. Compliance was safer than compassion. Protocol was a shield. "Sir," Julian said, his voice turning into steel wrapped in velvet. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You are blocking the entrance for other guests." There were no other guests behind him. Vance stared at him. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. For a second, Julian thought the man might yell, might cause the scene that Julian dreaded above all else. He rested his hand near the radio on his belt, ready to call security. "Please," Julian thought, "give me a reason. Make this your fault." Vance saw the hand move. He looked at the radio. Then he looked at Julian's eyes. He didn't argue. He didn't scream. "Do you know who I am?" He didn't pull the race card, though the card was lying face up on the table between them, invisible and heavy as lead. Vance nodded, a slow, terrifyingly calm nod. "I see," Vance said. "You're just doing your job." "Exactly." Julian exhaled, relieved. "It's just policy, policy," Vance repeated. He tasted the word, found it bitter. "Very well." He turned around. He opened the heavy oak door. The wind howled, rushing into the lobby, scattering the silence Julian had fought so hard to protect. Vance stepped out into the deluge. The door clicked shut. Julian stood alone in the vestibule. He looked down at the puddle of water the man had left behind. It was dark and dirty against the white marble. He signaled for the porter. "Clean this up." Julian snapped, his voice trembling slightly. "Immediately. It looks like a mess." He walked back to the podium and tapped the screen. He found the reservation for David Vance. He pressed cancel. Reason no show. The entry vanished. The red warning light disappeared. The screen was perfect again. Blue, gold, and white. Order was restored. Julian took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and turned his back to the door, ready to serve the people who mattered. He didn't know that the camera in the vestibule, the one with the audio feed that went directly to the corporate cloud server, had recorded every second of it. And he didn't know that the payment authorization pending flag on the reservation wasn't a credit card decline. It was a system override code used by the ownership group. But tonight, Julian felt safe. He had protected the sanctuary. The mop moved in a wide, hypnotic arc across the marble, consuming the last traces of the storm. Julian watched the porter work. The gray water in the bucket swirled, holding the dirt from David Vance's shoes, the only physical proof that the man had ever stood there. With a final squeeze of the wringer, the proof was gone. The floor was white again. The lights of the chandelier caught the damp stone and turned it into a mirror. Julian exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that he hadn't realized he was holding. He adjusted his cufflinks. He smoothed the front of his jacket. He ran a hand through his hair, ensuring not a single strand was out of place. He had done his job. That was the mantra that began to loop in his mind, synchronizing with the beat of the jazz playing softly over the speakers. I protected the room. I protected the experience. He turned his back on the door and walked into the dining room. The transition was immediate. The air in the lobby had been thin and cold. The air in the dining room was rich, heavy with the scent of roasted duck, reduction sauces, and expensive perfume. It was a sensory fortress. The noise of the rain was gone, replaced by the clink of silver against china and the murmur of satisfied conversations. This was the machine Julian operated. It was a beautiful, terrible engine of exclusion. Its value was defined not by who was inside, but by who was kept outside. He moved through the tables like a ghost, his eyes scanning for imperfections. A water glass half empty at table 4. A napkin dropped at table 7. He signaled a busboy with a subtle flick of his finger, a gesture so small it was invisible to the guests, but screamed like a siren to the staff. He approached table 12. This was the center of gravity for the evening. Mr. Holloway sat there. Holloway was the regional director for the restaurant group, the man who held Julian's career in his manicured hands. He was eating the signature ribeye, accompanied by a bottle of Cabernet that cost more than the weekly wage of the dishwasher in the back. Holloway was a man of metrics. He didn't care about effort. He cared about yield. Julian slowed his pace, adopting the deferential, gliding walk of a servant king. "Is everything to your satisfaction, Mr. Holloway?" Julian asked, his voice a low purr. Holloway chewed slowly. He didn't look up immediately. He cut another piece of meat, the knife sliding through the flesh with zero resistance. "The temperature is good, Julian," Holloway said, finally raising his eyes. They were cold blue and assessing, but the pacing was a little aggressive on the appetizers. "We felt rushed." "I apologize." "Sir," Julian said, dipping his head. "I'll speak to the kitchen. We'll slow the main course service to compensate." "Do that," Holloway said. He took a sip of wine. Then he paused, setting the glass down. "I saw you at the front earlier." Through the glass, Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. A cold spike of adrenaline shot through his stomach. Had Holloway seen him turn Vance away? Had he seen the man's face? Yes, Julian said, keeping his face a mask of neutral attentiveness. "A minor issue. A walk-in." Holloway asked, dismissive. "Attempted." Julian corrected. He didn't have a reservation. He was confused about the nature of the establishment. "I felt he wouldn't be comfortable here." It was a masterclass in coded language. Confused. Comfortable. Soft words that wrapped around hard prejudices. Holloway nodded, satisfied. "Good. You have to curate the room, Julian? That's what we pay for. The atmosphere is as fragile as a souffle. One wrong element, one loud voice. One person who doesn't understand the etiquette, and the whole thing collapses. Exactly, sir, Julian said. The validation washed over him like a warm drug. He wasn't a villain. He was a curator. He was a guardian of the souffle. Keep it tight, Holloway said, returning to his steak. I'm looking at the quarterly numbers next week. You're doing well. Don't let the standards slip. Never, sir. Julian walked away, feeling lighter. The guilt that had pricked him in the lobby began to calcify into righteousness. He had made the hard call, and the system had applauded him for it. He went to the host stand and picked up the tablet again. He looked at the slot where David Vance had been. The empty space on the screen was soothing. It was clean. Julian, the voice came from his left. It was Elena, the lead hostess. She was young, barely 22, with eyes that hadn't yet learned to filter out the humanity of the job. She was holding a stack of meanness, looking at the tablet over his shoulder. I thought we had a 7:30, she whispered. The Vance table. I saw you talking to a man. Julian stiffened. He turned the tablet screen away from her, a reflex of concealment. He was a no-show, Julian said sharply. But he was here, Elena insisted, her brow furrowing. I saw him. The older gentleman. He looked soaked. Did we not have a table? He didn't have a valid reservation, Julian said. His voice was too loud. A couple at a nearby table glanced over. Julian lowered his volume, stepping into Elena's personal space to assert dominance. There was a payment flag on his profile, and he was late. We don't seat incomplete profiles, Elena. You know the protocol. I know, she said, shrinking back. He looked like he really wanted to be here. He had a confirmation number. Numbers don't matter if the profile is flagged. Julian snapped. Stop questioning the decision. Clear table 14. We have a VIP waitlist to move. Elena hesitated. She looked at the door, then back at Julian. For a moment, he saw judgment in her eyes. He saw the reflection of what he had done. But she was young, and she needed this job, and Julian was the manager. Yes, chef, she said, a slip of the tongue using the kitchen term for obedience. She walked away. Julian watched her go. He hated her in that moment. He hated her for witnessing it. He hated her for making him say it out loud. He needed to bury it deeper. He walked into the kitchen. The noise hit him like a physical blow. The roar of the exhaust hoods, the clatter of pans, the shouting of expeditors. This was the engine room. It was hot, bright, and violent. The sus chef screamed. 2 venison, 1 base, mid-rare on the steak. Yes, chef! The line caroused. Julian stood by the pass, watching the plates go out. Every plate was a masterpiece. Every garnish was placed with tweezers. This was what mattered. The excellence. The product. He saw the ticket machine spit out a new order. The printer made a rhythmic zust sound. Table 14. The table that would have been Vance's. It was now occupied by a group of 4. Young finance types, loud, wearing watches that cost more than cars. They had been squeezed in from the waitlist immediately after Julian canceled Vance. Zuzzed. Appetizer caviar service. Champagne. Entree 4 extra age porterhouse. Total estimated bill was $200. Julian looked at the ticket. He felt a surge of professional vindication. Vance was a single diner. He would have ordered a soup, maybe a main, drank tap water. His check average would have been maybe $80. He would have occupied a prime table for 90 minutes. These men were spending $200 in the first hour. Mathematically, Julian had just made the restaurant money. He had optimized the inventory. He had traded a low-value asset for a high-value asset. It wasn't racism. He told himself as he stared at the printer. It was economics. It was business. The system didn't care about the color of the man's skin. It cared about the color of his credit limit. Julian was just the algorithm made flesh. Service, the chef yelled, slamming a plate onto the pass. Julian picked up the plate. It was hot. It burned his fingertips, but he didn't flinch. He carried it out into the dining room, moving past the spot where Alina stood. He didn't look at her. He delivered the food to table 14. "Gentlemen," Julian said, bestowing his smile upon them. "The porterhouse? Excellent choice." "Thanks, boss," one of the men said, not even looking up from his phone. He was laughing at something on the screen. "Hey, bring another bottle of the bubbly."
"Yeah."
Immediately, Julian said. He walked back to the podium. The night wore on. The rain continued to batter the glass, but inside, the light remained golden. The rhythm of service smoothed over the jagged edge of the incident. At 9:00 p.m., the restaurant was at peak capacity. The hum was deafeningly perfect. Julian stood at his station. Feeling the familiar exhaustion in his legs, he checked the log. Reservations 142. Covers 138, no-shows 4. There it was. Just a number. A statistic. David Vance was no longer a man. He was part of the 3% attrition rate. He was a tax write-off. Julian's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Personal devices were forbidden on the floor. But then the tablet on the stand, the corporate tablet, flashed. A notification banner dropped down from the top of the screen. It was a system-wide alert sent to all management terminals in the region. LRT executive visit. Chairman inbound to Sector 4 locations. Please ensure all VIP protocols are active. Julian read the message. He felt a flicker of excitement. The chairman. The mythical figure at the top of the pyramid. If the chairman was touring, and he saw how well Julian was running the flagship, it could mean a promotion. It could mean escaping the floor and moving to corporate. He quickly tapped the knowledge button. Sector 4. That was this neighborhood. The chairman was close. Julian scanned the room, his eyes sharp. He needed everything perfect. He needed to make sure no more accidents happened tonight. He needed to make sure the door was guarded. He didn't connect the two events. The mind is a powerful editor. It cuts scenes that don't fit the narrative it wants to tell. The man in the wet coat with the pending payment was a vagrant, a confusion. The chairman was a god, a figure of power who would arrive in a limousine with an entourage. They could not be the same thing. The system wouldn't allow such a paradox. Julian wiped a smudge from the screen of the tablet. He looked at the no-show list one last time, then minimized it. "Elena," he called out, his voice crisp and commanding. "Reset the VIP table near the window. Make sure the glassware is polished. The chairman might be stopping by." Elena looked at him. Her eyes were still troubled, but she nodded. "Yes, Julian! And Elena! Yes! If anyone else comes in looking unkempt," Julian said, gesturing vaguely at the storm outside. "Don't even let them get to the podium. We need the lobby pristine." "Understood," she whispered. Julian turned back to the room. He felt ready. He felt professional. He felt entirely, fatally correct. The kitchen was no longer just a place of production. It had become a bunker under siege. News of the chairman's proximity had spread through the stainless steel arteries of the restaurant like a virus. It changed the molecular density of the air. The chefs didn't just cook, they performed. The dishwashers didn't just scrub, they polished. Every surface was wiped down until it was chemically raw. Julian stood at the pass, the border between the chaos of the heat and the serenity of the dining room. He felt a strange, vibrating energy in his fingertips. It was fear, yes, but it was also a potent cocktail of ambition. This was the test. The Vance incident earlier, the wet man, the puddle, the uncomfortable ejection, felt distant now, a necessary sacrifice to clear the deck for this moment. He watched the line cooks. They were terrified. "Clean edges!" The chef de cuisine barked, his face flushed. "If I see a single drop of sauce on the rim, I will throw the whole plate in the trash! The chairman eats with his eyes first!" Julian nodded in silent agreement. He eats with his eyes. That was the rule. That was why the lobby had to be empty. That was why the wrong element had to be removed. Holloway appeared at Julian's elbow. The regional director had finished his steak, wiped his mouth, and now stood in the service alley. Transforming from a diner into an inspector, he smelled of rich red wine and expensive cologne. He's at the Crosstown location. Holloway murmured, checking his phone. He just left. That puts him here in 20 minutes. Traffic is heavy. We're ready, Julian said. He gestured to the dining room. Table 12 is cleared and reset. I have the 82 Bordeaux decanting. I've instructed the staff to minimize radio chatter. Holloway looked at Julian. For the first time all night, there was something akin to respect in the older man's eyes. You run a tight ship, Julian. I like that. You understand that the Sterling isn't a restaurant for hungry people. It's a restaurant for people who want to feel safe, protected from the mediocrity of the world. Yes, sir? The chairman. Holloway paused, looking at the swinging doors. He's a peculiar man, obsessive. He built this empire on details. He once fired a general manager in Chicago because the ice cubes were the wrong density. True story. They melted too fast. Diluted the scotch. Julian felt a cold shiver of validation. The wrong density. That was exactly what David Vance had been. A human being of the wrong density. He would have diluted the room. I handled a situation earlier, Julian ventured, needing to cement his alignment with this philosophy. A walk in. Disheveled. Didn't fit the profile. I turned him away to keep the floor clear for the arrival. Holloway nodded, barely listening, his eyes on a waiter carrying a tray of martinis. Good. Never clog the arteries. If the chairman walks in and sees a line or sees clutter, he'll turn around and walk out. And if he walks out, we all lose our bonuses. Clutter, that was the word. Human clutter. Julian returned to the floor. The pattern of the night had solidified. Every action was now filtered through the lens of what would the chairman see. He approached the host's stand. Elena was there, standing with her back straight, her hands clasped. She looked pale. The earlier confrontation had drained her, but she was holding the line. She was learning. "Status, Julius! Quiet!" she said. "We have 2 tables turning over in Section 3. I'm holding the door? Good. If the phone rings, let it go to voicemail. We don't need the noise." As he spoke, the heavy oak door opened. Julian spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. This was it. But it wasn't the chairman. It was a courier. A young man in a blue windbreaker, shaking a wet umbrella, holding a large, thermal delivery bag. He looked confused, his eyes darting around the opulence of the lobby. "Delivery for kitchen." The boy mumbled. "Specialty produce? Truffles." Julian moved instantly. The speed of his reaction surprised even himself. It was a reflex honed by the earlier incident. He couldn't have a delivery boy dripping water in the lobby 5 minutes before the chairman arrived. It was the same pattern, the same threat. Out. Julian hissed, advancing on the boy. But the chef said, "Side door." Julian commanded, pointing a rigid finger toward the alley entrance hidden down the street. "You never come through the front. You are contaminating the space. Get out. Now?" The boy's eyes went wide. He stumbled back, intimidated by the sheer intensity of Julian's glare. Okay. Sorry, man." "Don't call me man," Julian snapped. Oh, the boy fled. The door swung shut. Julian turned to Elena. He expected to see approval. Instead, he saw a flicker of fear. Not fear of the chairman, fear of him. That was intense. Elena whispered. That was necessary. Julian corrected her. He walked over to the spot where the boy had stood. He checked the floor. No water. Good. You have to learn to distinguish, Elena. There is the product, and there is the packaging. The front door is the packaging. You don't put a shipping label on a work of art. "He was just doing his job," she said, her voice trembling. "And we are doing ours." Julian leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you want to be a hostess forever? Or do you want to manage?" Because management is about making the hard choices so the guests don't have to. He saw the resignation in her eyes. The light of resistance was dying out. She nodded slowly. Yes, Julian. Good. He had passed it on. The infection was complete. She would stop the next one. She would guard the gate. Julian walked back to the podium and tapped the screen. He brought up the floor plan. He looked at the empty VIP table by the window. It was a shrine waiting for its god. He decided to check the reservation list one more time, just to be sure the system was purged. He scrolled down to the canceled section. David Vance, canceled. No show. He clicked on the profile. He wanted to see if there were any notes he had missed, any reason the man had been so insistent. The profile opened. Usually, guest profiles contained basic data: allergies, birthday, water preference, but this profile was sparse. It had no dining history, no credit card on file, just that, authorization pending. Flag. But there was a note in the company field. Julian had ignored it earlier because the font was small, and the rain was loud, and the man was wet. The field read TSG Holdings. Julian frowned. TSG, the Sterling Group. He stared at the letters. A tiny, cold worm of unease began to twist in his gut. It wasn't a realization. Not yet. It was just a dissonance. Why would a random man off the street have the holding company's name on his reservation? Maybe a supplier. Julian thought. Maybe an ex-employee trying to use an old discount code. Yes, that made sense. That explained the authorization pending. It was an invalid employee code. The man was a grifter. A former staff member trying to scam a free meal. Julian felt a surge of relief. He had been right. He had spotted the fraud. He had protected the restaurant from a scammer. Mr. Holloway. Julian signaled the director over. He needed to share this victory. He needed to cement his status before the chairman arrived. Holloway drifted over, looking at his watch. 15 minutes. Julian. Is the valet ready? Standing by, Julian said. Sir, regarding the earlier incident. The walk-in. The clutter, Holloway corrected. Yes, I checked the logs. He used a reservation code linked to TSG Holdings. I suspect he was a former employee trying to use an inactive corporate account. I just wanted to flag it for security. Holloway froze. The wine glass he was holding stopped halfway to his mouth. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to drop away. TSG Holdings? Holloway asked. His voice was very quiet. Yes, sir. Probably a supplier or a maintenance contractor. He had that look. Working class. Holloway lowered the glass. He turned to look at Julian. His face had lost its casual, imperious boredom. It was now sharp, alert, and suddenly pillion, Holloway said. What did this man look like? Older? Julian said, dismissing the memory even as he summoned it. African-American. Maybe 60. Short hair. Wore a trench coat, but it was off the rack. Scuffed shoes. The Holloway stared at him. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. And he had a reservation. Holloway whispered. Yes? Under Vance. David Vance. Holloway dropped his wine glass. It hit the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. The crystal shattered into 1,000 diamonds. The dark red wine exploded outward, splashing onto Julian's polished shoes, staining the pristine white cuffs of his trousers. The dining room went silent. Heads turned. The jazz music seemed to stutter. Julian stared at the broken glass, then up at Holloway. He expected anger. He expected to be yelled at for the mess. But Holloway wasn't looking at the floor. He was looking at Julian with an expression of absolute, unadulterated horror. It was the look of a man watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing he is in the passenger seat. David. Holloway whispered. The name came out like a prayer for mercy. David, Vance, Sear. Julian asked, his smile faltering. Is something wrong? I can get a towel. You idiot! Holloway breathed. The word wasn't screamed, it was exhaled, a ghost of doom. You absolute, catastrophic idiot. I don't understand. Holloway grabbed Julian by the lapels of his jacket. The force was shocking. The director's hands were shaking violently. David Vance isn't a supplier. Holloway hissed, his face inches from Julian's. Vance is his middle name. He uses it for bookings so he doesn't trigger the security protocols. Julian's heart stopped. The world tilted on its axis. His name, Holloway choked out, is David Vance Sterling. The silence that followed was louder than the storm outside. He's not just the chairman, Julian. He's the founder. He owns the building. He owns the brand. He owns the ground we are standing on. Holloway released Julian, shoving him back slightly. And you just threw him out into the rain. Julian stood frozen. The red wine on his shoes looked like blood. The notification on the tablet, executive visit inbound, suddenly made terrible, sickening sense. He wasn't coming. He had already been here, and Julian had treated him like trash. The name David Vance Sterling hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Julian felt the blood drain from his face, a physical sensation of cold rushing from his extremities to his core. The restaurant, the golden lights, the murmuring guests, the smell of truffle began to warp. The pristine environment he had guarded so viciously was no longer a sanctuary. It was a courtroom, and he was the defendant who had just confessed. He didn't say. Julian stammered. His voice was thin, reedy. He didn't tell me who he was. Holloway was already moving. The regional director had abandoned all pretense of elegance. He was tapping furiously on his phone, his fingers slipping on the screen. Of course he didn't say! Holloway snapped, not looking up. That's the test, you fool! He tests the culture! He comes in anonymously to see how we treat the nobody. That's his entire philosophy! Service is not what you give to kings. It's what you give to strangers. It's on page 1 of the handbook you claim to have read. Julian leaned against the podium. His legs felt like water. He remembered the handbook. He remembered skipping the preamble to get to the operational protocols. I thought he was a vagrant, Julian whispered. His shoes! His shoes! Holloway let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. Those are custom orthotics. The man has bad knees from waiting tables for 30 years before he bought his first building. You judge the owner of $1 billion hospitality group by his shoes. Holloway put the phone to his ear. Voicemail. God damn it. He looked at Julian with eyes that were no longer assessing, but condemning. He was here. He saw you turn him away. He saw you lie about the reservation. He saw you prioritize the aesthetic over the human. I was protecting the brand. Julian pleaded. It was a reflex, a desperate attempt to find shelter in the logic that had served him so well an hour ago. You are the brand.
Julian!
Holloway shouted. This time heads did turn. The dining room went deadly quiet. And you just showed him that the brand is rotten. The phone in Holloway's hand buzzed. He looked at it. His face went gray. It's corporate, Holloway whispered. It's the board secretary. He answered the call, turning his back to Julian. Yes. I'm at the location now.
I understand.
Yes, I will handle it immediately. Please, tell him it was a misunderstanding. I see. Holloway hung up. He stood still for a long moment, staring at the wet umbrella stand in the corner. Then he turned back to Julian. He's not coming back tonight, Holloway said. His voice was flat dead. He's gone to a diner down the street. Joe's all night. He's eating a burger. Julian blinked. The absurdity of it hit him. The chairman of the Sterling Group, eating at a greasy spoon while his flagship restaurant sat full of people waiting to impress him. And, Holloway continued, he has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. The topic is brand integrity and systemic failure. Julian felt a wave of nausea. Am I fired? Holloway looked at him. It was a pitying look. Fired? Julian, if you were fired, that would be mercy. No. You're not fired yet. Holloway stepped closer. He wants to see you tomorrow, at the headquarters, 900 a.m. He specifically requested the manager on duty. He wants to see me. He wants to understand, Holloway said. He wants to know why. He wants to hear you explain, to his face, why David Vance wasn't good enough for a table at the Sterling. Julian swallowed. The throat felt dry as sand. But first, Holloway said, his voice hardening again, we have a service to finish. And we have a problem. What problem? The video, Holloway said. The security feed from the lobby. The cloud upload is automatic, but there's a local cache. If that footage of you turning him away exists, if it leaks, if the press finds out we turned away a black man who happens to be our own CEO, Holloway didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The implication was a nuclear winter for the company. I need you to go to the server room, Holloway said. I need you to pull the drive. Now, you want me to delete it? Julian asked. I want you to secure it, Holloway lied. They both knew it was a lie. We can't have that footage floating around. Go. Do it now. Julian nodded. He felt like a sleepwalker. He turned and walked toward the kitchen, past the staff who were now whispering, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Elena watched him go, her eyes wide and frightened. She knew something was wrong. She knew the king had fallen. Julian entered the back office. The server rack hummed in the corner, a tower of blinking green lights. It was the brain of the restaurant. It recorded everything. Every transaction, every reservation, every second of video. He found the DVR unit. He found the USB port. He paused. His hand hovered over the machine. He remembered Vance's face, the disappointment. I'm just hungry. I have money. Julian realized, with a sickening jolt, that he hadn't just made a mistake. He had revealed his true nature. The system hadn't forced him to be cruel. The system had given him the option to be cruel, and he had taken it because it felt like power. He had wanted to be the gatekeeper. He had wanted to decide who mattered. And now the system, represented by Holloway, was asking him to cover it up, to erase the evidence, to protect the lie. If he deleted the footage, it would be his word against Vance's. Vance was powerful, yes, but without the video, it was just a story, a misunderstanding, a system glitch. Julian could claim the computer really did show no reservation. He could lie his way to safety. But if he left the footage, if he left it, the truth would be there. The cold, hard truth of his prejudice. The truth of his politeness masking his disdain. He looked at the screen. He saw the timestamp 19:37 p.m. He clicked on the file. The video played. He saw himself. He saw the perfectly tailored suit. He saw the fake smile. He saw Vance, wet and patient. He saw himself block the path. He saw himself gesture to the door. It was ugly. Without the sound, it looked even worse. It looked like a man shooing away a stray dog. Julian felt tears prick his eyes. Not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity. Why did he have to come tonight? Why did he have to look like that? The door to the office opened. It wasn't Holloway. It was Alina. "Julian!" she whispered. "Mr. Holloway is shouting at the chef. He's losing it." She looked at the screen. She saw the freeze frame of Julian pointing at the door. She looked at Julian. "That's him, isn't it?" she asked softly. "Yes," Julian croaked. "Who is he?" "Is the owner," Julian said. The words tasted like ash. The Alina gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God! Julian! I have to delete it," Julian said, his voice trembling. "Holloway told me to. If I don't, everything is over." Alina stared at him. She was young, naive, still believing in the romance of the industry. But in that moment, she looked older than him. "If you delete it," she said, "you're saying it was okay." "I'm saying I want to keep my job," Julian snapped. "I'm saying I don't want to be destroyed." "But you did it," she said. "You did it, Julian." He looked at the mouse. The cursor hovered over the trash icon. He had a choice. Again, the first choice, turning Vance away, had been made in a split second. This choice was deliberate. This choice was slow. He could protect himself. He could obey Holloway. He could serve the system one last time, or he could let the truth stand. He heard Holloway's voice in the corridor, getting closer. Where is he? Does he have the drive? Julian looked at Elena. Go back to the floor, he said. Julian. Go. She turned and ran. Julian looked at the screen. He closed his eyes. He clicked. Are you sure you want to permanently delete this file? Yes. The file vanished. The screen was empty. Julian let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He had done it. He had doubled down. He had saved the narrative. He pulled the USB drive out empty. Holloway burst into the room. Do you have it? Holloway demanded. It's gone, Julian said. The file is corrupt. The system glitched. Holloway stopped. He looked at Julian. He understood. A dark, conspiratorial look passed between them. Good, Holloway said. Technical errors happen. We can work with technical errors. He clapped a hand on Julian's shoulder. It felt heavy, like a shackle. You survived tonight, Julian. But tomorrow you have to perform the greatest act of your life. Julian nodded. He felt hollowed out. He had scrubbed the floor, and now he had scrubbed the memory. There was nothing left but the lie, and the meeting at 900 a.m. The elevator to the 42nd floor of the Sterling Group headquarters did not have buttons. It had a touchscreen that simply displayed the destination executive suite. Julian stood alone in the car. The walls were mirrored, forcing him to look at himself from every angle. He looked tired. The crispness of his suit from the night before had evaporated. The fabric felt heavy like a shroud. He had not slept. He had spent the night staring at his ceiling, replaying the click of the mouse that had deleted the footage. File corrupted. The lie had tasted like ash then. Now, in the cold light of morning, it felt like a noose. The doors slid open with a whisper. The reception area was a vast expanse of white stone and glass, suspended above the city skyline. It was silent. There was no jazz music here, no clinking silverware. Just the low, pressurized hum of a building that cost $300 million to construct. Holloway was waiting for him. The regional director looked different here. In the restaurant, Holloway was a king. Here, he was a functionary. He looked smaller against the backdrop of the skyline. He was pacing, checking his watch. You're here, Holloway said. No greeting, no handshake. Julian replied. Holloway grabbed Julian's arm, pulling him away from the main boardroom doors and into a smaller, glass-walled conference room to the left. Inside, a woman was sitting at a table. She had a laptop open and a stack of files in front of her. She wore glasses with thick black frames and a suit that looked sharper than a scalpel. This is Ms. Mercer, Holloway said, closing the door, general counsel for the group. Julian felt his stomach drop. Legal. This wasn't a reprimand, it was an inquest. Sit down, Julian, Mercer said. She didn't look up from her screen. Her voice was dry, devoid of inflection. Julian sat. The chair was ergonomic, expensive, and uncomfortable. Let's skip the pleasantries, Mercer said, finally raising her eyes. They were gray and unreadable. We have a situation. The chairman is in the boardroom. He is distressed. He views last night's incident as a personal failure of the culture he built. I am deeply sorry, Julian began, rehearsing the apology he had crafted in the shower. I didn't recognize him, and I... Stop! Mercer cut him off. She raised a hand. We don't care about your apology, Julian. We care about the liability. She tapped a file on the table. Separate. Vance, the chairman, is an idealist. He wants to believe that if he exposes a flaw in the system will learn. But the market is not an idealist. The market is a predator. She turned the laptop around so Julian could see the screen. It showed a graph. TSG Holdings is currently trading at $142 a share, Mercer said. If the story breaks that the founder and chairman was racially profiled and refused service at his own flagship restaurant by his own management, that stock drops. Conservatively, we lose 15% in the first hour. That's $400 million in market cap. Julian stared at the numbers. He felt a disconnect. He was thinking about a wet coat and a puddle. They were thinking about $400 million. And it's not just the money, Holloway added, his voice tight. It's the pensions. The kitchen staff, the porters, the suppliers. If the brand becomes toxic, we close locations. People lose jobs, innocent people, thousands of them. Mercer leaned forward. This is the dilemma, Julian. The chairman wants the truth. He wants to use this as a teachable moment. He wants to fire you publicly and tell the world that TSG does not tolerate bias. I deserve it, Julian whispered. Perhaps, Mercer said, but the company cannot afford it. An admission of guilt is an admission of systemic failure. It opens us to class action lawsuits. It destroys the brand equity. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a single page, dense with text. So, Mercer said, we have prepared a statement of facts regarding the incident. Julian looked at the paper. He read the first paragraph. Manager Julian Cross acted in response to a security alert initiated by frontline staff. He read further. The hostess, Elena Rodriguez, indicated to Mr. Cross that the individual was behaving erratically and had made aggressive comments regarding the waitlist A. Mr. Cross, relying on the assessment of his subordinate, followed standard refusal of service protocols to ensure guest safety. Julian stopped reading. He looked up, horrified. This isn't true, he said. Elena didn't say that. Elena wanted to seat him. She begged me to check the reservation again. The video footage is corrupted, Holloway said, staring at a spot on the wall just above Julian's head. There is no record of the interaction. It is your word against, well, against the narrative? You want me to blame Elena? Julian asked. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She's 22. She makes minimum wage. She is a probationary employee, Mercer corrected. If she made an error in judgment, if she panicked and flagged a harmless guest as a threat, then the system worked. You, the manager, protected the room based on the information you were given. It becomes a training issue for a junior staff member, not a bias issue for management. She'll be fired? Julian said. She will be let go, Mercer said calmly, with a standard severance. She will find another job. But you, Julian, you will remain. You will be the manager who stood by his team's safety protocols. The chairman might still be angry about the outcome, but he won't be able to claim discrimination if the root cause was a frightened young girl. I can't do that, Julian said. His hands were shaking. She was the only one who tried to do the right thing. And you are the one who deleted the footage, Mercer said softly. The room went dead silent. Julian froze.
We know,
Mercer said. Holloway told me. Destruction of corporate data is a felony, Julian. If you go in there and tell the truth, that you profiled the chairman and then destroyed the evidence, we won't just fire you. We will prosecute you. You will never work in this industry again. You will be the face of racism in hospitality for the next decade. But, Holloway interjected, stepping closer, offering the lifeline. If you sign this statement, if you stick to this version, the deletion becomes irrelevant. You were just clearing space on the drive, a technical oversight. Julian looked at the paper. I, Julian Cross, acted on the explicit verbal warning of hostess Elena Rodriguez. It was a trap, a perfect, moral trap. To save himself, he had to destroy the only person who had been innocent. To save the company. The thousands of jobs, the pensions, the stock price, he had to sacrifice the truth. The chairman is waiting, Mercer said, checking the time. He expects an explanation. He expects to know why this happened. If you tell him it was your bias, you burn everything down. If you tell him it was a misunderstanding caused by a junior employee's error, we all survive. Does he know? Julian asked. Does the chairman know about this strategy? The chairman deals in vision, Mercer said coldly. We deal in reality. Do not burden him with the mechanics of his own survival. Holloway opened the door. It's time. Julian stood up. He took the paper. He didn't sign it yet. He held it in his hand, the edges crumping under his grip. They walked out of the glass room and toward the double mahogany doors of the main boardroom. Julian felt a sensation of vertigo. He thought about Alina. He thought about her face in the server room, the disappointment in her eyes when he hovered over the delete button. If you delete it, you're saying it was okay. Now he was being asked to do something far worse than delete a file. He was being asked to rewrite history using her reputation as the inked. Holloway pushed the boardroom doors open. The room was vast. A table long enough to seat 30 people dominated the center. At the far end, framed by the floor-to-ceiling window and the gray morning sky, sat David Vance Sterling. He was not wearing the wet coat. He was wearing a simple gray sweater and reading glasses. He looked like a grandfather. He looked like the most powerful man in the world. He was eating a bagel. He looked up as they entered. His expression was not angry. It was sad. Profoundly, deeply sad. "Come in," Vance said. His voice echoed slightly in the large room. Mercer and Holloway stopped at the door, leaving Julian to walk the length of the table alone. It felt like walking the plank. Julian reached the end of the table. He stood before the chairman. Vance took a sip of coffee. He set the mug down. He looked at Julian's hands, then up at his eyes. "I built this company on a promise," Vance said softly, "that everyone who walks through our doors is a guest until they prove otherwise. Last night I walked through the door. I was not a guest. I was a nuisance." Vance leaned forward. "I've seen the reports, Julian. I've heard about the technical difficulties with the video." Vance's eyes sharpened. "But I don't need video. I was there. I want you to tell me man to man." Vance waited. The silence stretched. "Why?" Vance asked. "Why did you turn me away? Was it my coat? Was it my face? Or was it something else?" Julian felt the paper in his hand. He felt the eyes of Mercer and Holloway boring into his back. "Sign the paper. Blame the girl. Save the world. Tell the truth. Burn the witch. Lose everything." Julian opened his mouth. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at the kind, tired face of the man he had wronged. "Mr. Sterling," Julian began, his voice trembling. "The situation last night." He paused. He could see Elena's face. He could see the payment pending flag. He could see the lie he had already lived. "The situation last night was complex," Julian said. The words felt like vomit. "I was at the podium." And he took a breath. He looked at the paper one last time. "And I was given information that made me act." And Vance frowned. "Information. From whom?" Julian closed his eyes. He let the darkness in. "From the hostess stand," Julian said. "From Elena." He had done it. He had pulled the trigger. The lie hung in the conditioned air of the boardroom, heavy and toxic. "Elena," Vance repeated. The name seemed to confuse him. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The young woman at the stand. She barely spoke. She looked. She wanted to help me. Panic manifests in different ways. "Sir," Mercer interjected smoothly, stepping forward from the door. She walked to the table, placing her files down with a soft thud. Unexperienced staff often freeze. They project their anxiety onto the guest. She told Mr. Cross you were aggressive because she was overwhelmed. It's a common defensive psychological response. Vance looked at Mercer, then at Julian. "Is that what happened? Julian, she told you I was a threat." Julian felt a sensation of detachment, as if he were floating near the ceiling, watching a stranger inhabit his body. The stranger was wearing his suit. The stranger was nodding. "Yes, sir," Julian said. His voice was steady, too steady. "She came to the podium. She was shaking." She said, "The man at the door is making a scene. He's refusing to listen." I acted on her assessment. Vance looked at the bagel on his plate. He seemed to lose his appetite. He pushed the plate away. I built a company where the lowest ranking employee is supposed to be the most important, Vance said quietly. Because they are the first point of contact. If our frontline staff sees a 60-year-old black man as a threat just because he's standing there, then the rot is deeper than management. Exactly, Holloway said, seizing the narrative. It's a training issue, David. A failure of the vetting process for entry-level hires. Vance sighed. It was the sound of idealism dying under the weight of bureaucracy. Bring her in. Julian's heart stopped. Sir, bring her in, Vance commanded. I want to hear it from her. If she felt threatened, I want to apologize to her. And then I want to understand why. Mercer glanced at Holloway. There was a microsecond of calculation between them. A silent conversation. Can we control this? Mercer nodded imperceptibly.
Mixture.
Holloway, please retrieve Miss Rodriguez. She is in the waiting area. Holloway left. The heavy doors closed. Julian stood alone with the chairman and the lawyer. The silence was excruciating. He wanted to run. He wanted to confess. But the inertia of the lie was too strong. He was locked into the track now. To derail, it would mean his own destruction. The doors opened again. Elena walked in. She looked small in the vast room. She was wearing her street clothes, jeans, and a sweater. She looked young, terrified, and hopeful. When she saw Julian, her face brightened slightly. She saw an ally. She saw the manager she had tried to save in the server room. Mr. Vance, Holloway said, guiding her to the table. This is Elena Rodriguez. Elena stared at the chairman. She recognized him now. Her eyes went wide. Hey, she whispered. Hello, sir. I'm so sorry about last night. Vance looked at her with a mixture of pity and sadness. Elena, please, don't be afraid. We're just trying to establish the timeline. He leaned forward. My manager, Mr. Cross, tells me that you flagged me as a security risk, that you told him I was behaving aggressively. Is that true? Elena blinked. She looked at Vance, then she turned her head slowly to look at Julian. Her expression shifted. It went from confusion to realization, and then to a profound, shattering hurt. She saw Julian's averted eyes. She saw the rigid set of his jaw. She understood. Elena stammered. I never said that. Elena, Julian said. He forced himself to look at her. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. It's okay. You were stressed. It was raining. You told me the man at the door was causing a problem. Do you remember? I didn't. Elena's voice rose, cracking. I told you he had a reservation. I told you to check the list. You were the one who said, Mums Rodriguez. Mercer cut in. Her voice was like a whip. We have the incident report logged at 7:35 p.m. It states clearly that you requested manager intervention due to a hostile element in the lobby. There is no report, Elena cried, looking around the room for help. I never wrote a report. Mr. Cross wrote it, Mercer said calmly, based on your verbal escalation. Elena looked back at Julian. Tears were spilling down her cheeks now. Julian, why are you doing this? We were in the server room. You deleted the video. You told me. That's enough, Holloway barked. The room froze. The video files were corrupted, Holloway said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Are you now accusing your manager of tampering with evidence to cover up your mistake? Elena stood there, trembling. She was trapped. She was alone. She looked at Vance. Sir, please, she begged. I wanted to seat you. I promise. Vance looked at her. He wanted to believe her. Julian could see the struggle in the old man's eyes. But Vance was a businessman, and he was looking at two senior executives and a manager who all told one story, and a crying 22-year-old who told another. And if he believed the girl, he had to destroy his own management team. He had to admit that his flagship restaurant was run by liars. He had to tear down the structure of his own empire. The system offered him a way out. A painful, ugly way out, but a safe one. Vance looked down at his hands. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, the light was gone. "Thank you." "Elena," Vance said softly. "Sir," she asked. Mercer will handle the details," Vance said. He turned his chair away, looking out the window at the gray sky. Elena stood frozen. She looked at Julian one last time. There was no anger in her eyes anymore. Just a void. She had seen the world for what it was, and it had broken her. "Come with me, Miss Rodriguez," Mercer said, opening the door. "But I didn't." Elena's voice was a whisper. "We will process your severance," Mercer said, guiding her out with a firm hand on her shoulder. "You will sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the events of last night, and in exchange we will provide a neutral reference for your next employer." "I don't want a reference," Elena said, sobbing now. "I told the truth." "The truth," Mercer said as she pushed the girl into the hallway, "is what is on the record." The door clicked shut. Silence returned to the boardroom. Julian stood still. He felt cold. He felt entirely hollow. He had survived. He had kept his job. He had protected the stock price. Vance kept his back turned. "Leave us," Vance said to Holloway. "Sir." "Regarding the press release." "Get out," Vance said. Holloway nodded to Julian, a look of grim satisfaction on his face, and left the room. Julian was alone with the chairman. Vance swiveled his chair back around. He looked older than he had 5 minutes ago. He looked at Julian with an expression that was worse than anger. It was disgust. "You think you won," Vance said quietly. "No," Julian whispered. "You kept your job," Vance said. "You saved the company from a scandal. Mercer is happy. Holloway is happy." Vance stood up. He walked over to Julian. He stood close enough that Julian could smell the coffee on his breath. "I know she was telling the truth," Vance said. Julian stopped breathing. "I know it in my gut," Vance continued. "I know you threw me out. I know you lied about her. And I know you deleted that video." "Sir, don't," Vance hissed. "Don't insult me with another lie." He walked back to the table and picked up his glasses. "But I can't prove it. And I can't fire you without proving it, because Mercer tells me you'd sue, and the story would get out, and the brand would suffer. And I have 40,000 employees depending on this brand." Vance put his glasses in his pocket. "So you stay. You keep your title. You keep your salary." Vance walked to the door. He stopped and looked back. "But you and I both know what you are now, Julian. You're not a manager. You're just a mechanism. You're a part of the plumbing." Vance opened the door. "Go back to the restaurant?" Vance said. "Get back to work, and pray I never come back to eat." Vance walked out. Julian stood alone in the massive, silent room. The view of the city was spectacular. He could see for miles. He could see the traffic, the buildings, the people. He checked his pulse. It was normal. He checked his reflection in the glass. He looked the same. He had won. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, sealing him in the mirrored box, he realized the terrifying truth. The collapse hadn't been the company, or the stock, or his career. Those things were fine. The collapse was him. There was nothing left inside the suit but the system itself. 3 weeks later, the rain returned. It washed over the city with a gray, persistent misery, scrubbing the streets of dust, but leaving the grime embedded in the cracks. Julian stood at the host podium of the Sterling. Nothing had changed. That was the most terrifying part of the aftermath. The chandeliers still cast the same golden, flattering light. The jazz playlist looped through the same standards: Coltrane, Davis, Fitzgerald. The smell of truffle oil and money still hung in the air, thick enough to taste. The restaurant was full. The quarterly earnings report had been released that morning. TSG Holdings was up 4 points. The market had absorbed the rumors, digested the silence, and decided that profitability was the only moral metric that mattered. Julian adjusted his cuffs. They were new, silk knots, a gift from Holloway. "Table 4 is turning," a voice said beside him. It was not Elena. Elena was gone. She had been erased from the schedule, from the payroll system, and from the collective memory of the staff as if she had never existed. In her place stood Sarah. Sarah was 30, efficient, and entirely humorless. She had been transferred from the corporate office. She did not ask questions. She did not try to help guests who looked lost. She followed the protocol with the cold precision of a microprocessor. Reset for 2. Julian said, his voice flat. VIP list is active. Check the flags. Checked, Sarah replied. Mr. Sterling's office called. He is not dining tonight. Never dines here anymore, Julian said. It was true, since the meeting in the boardroom. David Vance Sterling had not set foot in his flagship location. He remained a ghost, a name on the letterhead, a signature on the paychecks. He had retreated to the high tower, leaving the machine to run itself. He had accepted the bargain, his wealth for his conscience. Julian looked out at the dining room. He saw Holloway sitting at the corner table, the same table where he had sat the night of the incident. Holloway was entertaining a group of investors. He was laughing, holding a glass of wine by the stem, looking light and unburdened. Holloway caught Julian's eye. He raised his glass in a subtle, congratulatory toast. Julian didn't smile. He couldn't. The muscles in his face felt paralyzed, frozen in a mask of professional neutrality. He nodded once, a micro movement of acknowledgement, and looked away. The system had not just survived, it had calcified. New protocols had been installed on the tablets. A new software update, it was called Guest Verification 2.0. Now, when a reservation was flagged, like Vance's had been, the system didn't just ask for a manager override. It required a biometric scan, a thumbprint from the manager on duty. It was a brilliant piece of engineering. It meant that every refusal, every rejection, every act of exclusion was literally signed by the manager's physical body. It shifted the liability 100% onto the individual. The company was now mathematically absolved of bias. Julian was the thumbprint. He was the gatekeeper. The heavy oak door opened. A draft of cold, wet air cut through the lobby. Julian felt it on his neck, a phantom touch that made him flinch. A couple walked in. They were young. The man was wearing a hoodie, wet from the rain. He was black. He looked around the lobby with wide, uncertain eyes, shaking a dripping umbrella. Julian's heart gave a single, painful thump. It was the echo of the trauma. For a second, he saw Vance. He saw the trench coat. He saw the scuffed shoes. But then the image resolved. It wasn't Vance. It was just a customer. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked. Her tone was polite, but her body language was a wall. She stepped in front of the podium, blocking the path. "Yeah, we don't have a reservation," the young man said. "Just wondering if you had a table." "We saw the lights." Sarah looked down at the tablet. The screen was blue. The restaurant was full, but there were 2 tables open for visual balance. The same tables Vance had pointed out. Sarah looked at the man's hoodie. She looked at the wet umbrella. She didn't look at his face. She looked at Julian. "We are fully committed," Sarah said, reciting the script Julian had taught her. "I can put you on the wait list. It's approximately 3 hours." The man's shoulders slumped. 3 hours. On a Tuesday. "It's a busy night," Sarah said. The man looked at Julian. He was looking for a higher authority. He was looking for humanity. "Sir," the man asked. "We're celebrating. Just got engaged. We won't be long." Julian looked at the man. He saw the hope in his eyes. He saw the innocence. He remembered Elena's voice. He looked like he really wanted to be here. He remembered Vance's voice. "You're just a mechanism. You're a part of the plumbing." Julian had a choice. He could override Sarah. He could walk over, shake the man's hand, take the wet umbrella, and seat them at the window. He could prove that he was still human. He could defy the algorithm. He looked at Holloway in the dining room. Holloway was watching him. The investors were watching him. The cameras were watching him. The silence stretched. The cost of the choice weighed on him. If he seated them and they were loud or underdressed or simply wrong, for the aesthetic, Holloway would note it. The perfection would be marred. The stock price relied on the perfection. Julian felt a coldness spread through his chest, extinguishing the last spark of resistance. "I'm afraid the hostess is correct," Julian said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and dead. "We are fully committed this evening. Perhaps you would be more comfortable at the bistro down the street. It's quite casual." The young man stared at him. He heard the subtext. He heard the word comfortable and understood it meant you don't belong here. "Right," the man said. His face hardened. The joy of his engagement drained away, replaced by the familiar armor of cynicism. "Got it. Casual. Congratulations on the engagement," Julian added. It was a reflex, a garnish on a poisoned dish. The man didn't answer. He took his fiancée's hand and turned around. They walked back out into the rain. The door clicked shut. "Clear the vestibule," Julian said to the porter, gesturing at the drops of water on the floor. "It looks messy." "Yes, sir." Sarah typed something into the tablet. Walk-in refused. Reason capacity. The lie was logged. The data was clean. Julian stood there. He felt a vibration in his pocket. It was his phone. A notification from the bank. Deposit received. Though 15,000 TSG performance bonus. He looked at the number. It was the price of his silence. It was the price of Alina's career. It was the price of the man in the hoodie. He felt nothing. No joy. No guilt. Just a dull, heavy sense of function. He was a part of the building now. He was as much a fixture as the chandeliers or the marble floor. He held the roof up, and in exchange, he was kept dry. He looked at the reflection in the glass of the front door. He saw himself. A man in a perfect suit, standing in a golden box. Outside in the dark, people were living. They were fighting, loving, getting wet, feeling hunger. They were messy and chaotic and real. Inside, everything was perfect, and everything was dead. Julian placed his hand on the podium. He pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner, just to make sure the screen stayed active. Identity verified manager. He stared at the words. They had refused to serve a man of color until they discovered he was the chairman. And when they discovered it, they didn't change the refusal. They just changed the manager into something that could refuse him again, and again, forever. Without blinking, the music swelled. A saxophone solo mourning something lost. Julian straightened his tie. He turned his back on the door. He looked into the room, scanning for imperfections, ready to serve the system that had consumed him. "Next," Julian whispered to the empty lobby. "Teach us to our wiads e shiar. We like to believe that when the truth is revealed, justice follows. We like to believe that the system corrects itself when the big boss sees the rot. But sometimes, the system is designed to survive the truth, not to fix it. Sometimes, the only thing that changes is the efficiency of the lie. If this story left a weight in your chest, if it made you question the cost of the perfect experience, take a moment to sit with that silence. Thank you for listening. If you want to explore more stories about the hidden costs of our world, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.